Hi everyone, welcome to the second week of our class, Introduction to Comparative Politics. Today we will be talking about the most foundational political institution of our time, that is, states. So there will be three questions that we will be dealing today, like how the emergence of states or modern states changed the political landscape of the world, the first one. The second one, how we can best define states. And the third one, how we can explain the emergence of first modern states in 16th and 17th century Western Europe, but not in other places. In this first part of the series, I will tackle with the first two questions, and in the second video, I will tackle with the final question. So, how did states change the political landscape of the world? Actually, before the emergence of the states, actually, people, like the ordinary people, like laymen, had access to the lethal weapons of the time. Like in 13th century Britain, almost every household had a sword, which was the most lethal weapon of the time. However, today we cannot talk about any person or any household or any family who own a nuclear aircraft carrier, right? Like the most lethal weapon of the time. So that the emergence of states actually meant the disarmament of, let's say, ordinary citizens or ordinary individuals, and restriction of their access to, let's say, these lethal weapons, and monopolization of these instruments of violence exercise by the state authority. Actually, this meant the elimination of internal rivalry or the internal violence or intrastate violence, whereas the proliferation of interstate violence or external threats. So, the third one, actually, before the states emerged, like we were like living, or the humanity was living in a world dominated by decentralized and dispersed organization of power. So, like the clerks or landlords or local prides, they had their own monetary wealth and resources enormously, and their own manpower and sometimes armed personnel, and their own peculiar and powerful social standing. And the authority or the political authority is disseminated or diffused among different central and local units. So unlike today, like the authority of, let's say, political power, such as empires, cannot easily radiate outside of the capital of the empire. And they were mostly shared by local authorities. So this is, and you shouldn't conflate this issue with today's federal organization of power. For example, in the United States, we are talking about a higher and extreme degree of decentralization here. Okay, and the fourth one, actually, there were like limited or almost no state identity or national identity to talk about before the emergence of the states. So people were like showing loyalty or like feeling associated with some local or transnational identities. Example for the former are, for example, like I am the peasant of the village X, or I am the serf of the Lord Y, or I go to that church of Z. But I don't claim myself, for example, I didn't used to claim myself as Turkish or as Ottoman. And there were some other identities, like transnational identities, though, like such as the Christendom or the Ummah. However, today, like most people identify themselves as a member of an like statewide or nationwide collectivity. So most of you call yourself or identify yourself as American, not from Amherst or not most of the time not a transnational identity. So, like to give some examples on how the exercise of violence or the source of violence have enormously changed over time. Actually, in 13th century Britain, the rate of homicides, like interstate violence, was 10 times higher than the current numbers today. This is a totally interesting development. On the other hand, though, like the number of like casualties as a result of interstate war actually increased 5 per 1,000 person in 18th century. This rose to 6 in 19th century, and it was 46 in 20th century, like 46 of 1,000 people who have lived in 20th century died as a result of interstate war. So, like although the source or the rate or degree of intrastate or internal violence radically decreased, we see a considerable increase in the rate and degree of interstate violence. So, what is state? Actual states, if there is only one single definition that you need to memorize in political science, this is the definition of the state by Max Weber, the prominent German sociologist of early 20th century. So you need to know almost every word in that definition. He defines state as a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of legitimate use of physical violence within a given territory. So he is talking about a few characteristics of state. And by the way, he doesn't define states in terms of its ends, functions, or the tasks. But he defines it in terms of its means, and the most foundational mean for him is the exercise of physical violence. Let's briefly go over the constitutive characteristics of statehood one by one. Let's start with the final one. Within a given territory. So the territoriality of modern states. So like this is a very simple idea. Like today, like the boundaries of American state are already clear, recognized, and like you can see it in the maps, and it doesn't overlap with the Mexican state. So in order for a political authority to claim juridical statehood, the boundaries it claims to control should be monopolized by it, and also should be organized by other states. So within a given territory, which was not the case before. Like before the emergence of modern states, we were not talking about clearly demarcated boundaries. So like the borders, like the visas or passports, like all other things that we today take for granted are just modern inventions of just last 1 or 2 centuries. So they were not present before. The other one, physical force. So, as I said, physical force. As I stated, that the exercise of physical force is the most important element of statehood, according to Max Weber. So today, like there are, let's say, many different units which have the authorization by the states to exercise violence over you, right? Like the campus police, or sheriff, or the town police, like SWAT, special forces, air forces, FBI. Even the postal services had some armed personnel to just exercise violence. They are authorized to do that. They are authorized to kill you. So states are the political authorities which have the exclusive access to the source of physical violence or physical force, and which is related to the concept of monopoly. So, like in a modern state, in an ideal state, there shouldn't be any other actor or any other authority which can exercise the physical violence over others. It should be carried out by the states, or it should be carried out by the actors or institutions authorized by the state. But the initial source of violence exclusively belongs to the state. Okay? And the other and final element here is legitimacy. So, like states, just like the earlier political forms or institutions preceding statehood, are actually the relations of man dominating man. However, like in modern states, the dominated groups or peoples or individuals like you or me, as long as we see the state authority, like the power holder, as legitimate actors, then like these political authorities will gain or will have met the requirement of legitimacy or justification in statehood. So it's an important element today. So there might be many different sources of legitimacy that you are attaching to statehood. So you might be like fearful of retaliation or punishment, or you might think that states your survival is dependent on the security service that states provide you, or let's say your subjectivity, or like all your access to the economic sources or education or other kinds of social or societal or economic goods are provided by the states. You might think any of them, and you might have different reasons for like attributing legitimacy or justification to state authority. But no matter these resources, as long as you ascribe this legitimacy, then this qualification will be met. Okay. So there are, according to Max Weber, there are three different sources of inner justification, or the basic source of legitimation of state authority. The first one is traditional one, with references to eternal past and ancient recognition of political authority. Like this can be originated in either, let's say, the religious claims or patriarchal claims. But here, like the people, the individuals, they are, let's say, showing the recognition of a traditional source of authority. Like the examples of which of this can be said, let's say, uh, like Saudi Arabia today or Iran today. The second one is what is called charismatic authority. This is an extraordinary gift of grace, or let's say personal devotion to the heroism or revelation of individual leadership. So as long as you find your authority, like this can be a political party leader, this can be warlord, this can be demagogues, this can be, let's say, presidents or prime ministers, like any other political authority or actor that you might think, as long as you justify like their leadership with references to their personal charm and charisma and like all other kinds of so-called extraordinary peculiarities, then you are applying this source of charismatic legitimacy here. And the third one, let's say legal or rational legitimacy, it's actually about the validity of legal statutes and functional competence based on, let's say, rational rules. So it is kind of an legitimacy, let's say, uh, followed by, let's say, the modern bureaucracy of the today. So you are deeming an actor as legitimate because, like, they show, let's say, functional competence, or they assume this power as a result of agreed and rationally created or constructed rules, etc. So, which is much more common, or which is supposed to be more common today in modern politics. So these three inner justifications actually are not mutually exclusive. A political authority, for example, the one in Saudi Arabia, is relying on a traditional justification. However, some people might find him the charismatic and personally charming as well. Or, let's say, in United States, let's say, although the president, let's say John F. Kennedy, he was enjoying a rational or legal legitimacy at the time as the president of United States, who was selected as a result of commonly agreed rational principles. But in the eyes of some of his followers, he was also achieving a sort of an extraordinary personal charm and showing individual leadership. So a person or a unit can embody one or more than one of these different sources of inner justification. So they are not mutually exclusive. So, like, this is the end of the first part here. In the next video, I will talk about how Charles Tilly, he was a very prominent political scientist or sociologist, uh, whose theory of how states emerge became the most agreed one. We will talk about it briefly.